What keeps a nation standing, and what causes it to fall? 2 Chronicles answers that question with striking clarity. It retells the story of Judah's kings, not to glorify power or conquest, but to show the lasting impact of faithfulness, repentance, and reform. Written for people rebuilding after loss, this book reminds us that failure is not the end, and return is always possible. In this video, we'll explore 2 Chronicles, tracing cycles of obedience and rebellion, and discovering why this ancient message still matters today. Overview. 2 Chronicles begins with Solomon and the completion of the temple, the spiritual heart of Israel. The dedication of the temple sets the tone for the entire book. Solomon's prayer emphasizes humility, repentance, and God's readiness to forgive when people turn back to him. After Solomon's death, the focus narrows to the kings of Judah. Each reign is evaluated not by military success or political alliances, but by spiritual direction. Some kings abandon worship and lead the nation into corruption, resulting in defeat and instability. Others lead powerful reforms. Kings such as Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, and Josiah call the people back to God, restore worship, and bring seasons of peace. This cycle repeats throughout the book. Obedience leads to stability and blessing. Rebellion leads to warning and discipline. Eventually, persistent unfaithfulness results in Babylon's invasion, the destruction of Jerusalem, and exile. Yet 2 Chronicles ends with hope, not despair. The final verses record King Cyrus's decree, inviting the people to return and rebuild, showing that God's purposes continue beyond judgment. Historical and social setting. 2 Chronicles was written after the Babylonian exile, during a time of rebuilding and reflection. The people had lost their king, their land, and their temple. Questions of identity, purpose, and faith loomed large. Rather than retelling history to assign blame, the chronicler reframes the past to teach lessons. Prophets are highlighted as voices of warning and correction. Worship is shown as central to national life. The message is clear: strength does not come from armies or alliances, but from humility and obedience. Key themes in 2 Chronicles. Repentance as a turning point. Again and again, the book shows that when people humble themselves and seek God, restoration follows. Repentance changes direction. Leadership shapes destiny. The spiritual condition of the nation often mirrors its leaders. Faithful leadership brings renewal. Pride and compromise bring decline. Prayer and dependence on God. Prayer is not presented as a ritual, but as an act of surrender. When leaders pray honestly, God responds. Prophetic warning and correction. God continually sends messengers to call his people back. Ignoring warning leads to loss, but listening opens the door to healing. Obedience and consequences. The connection between choices and outcomes is clear. Faithfulness brings stability. Rebellion invites discipline. God's mercy in judgment. Even when judgment comes, it is never without purpose. God disciplines in order to restore, not to destroy. Hope beyond failure. The final note of return shows that collapse is not the end of the story. Key verses in 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14, a call to humility, prayer, and healing. 2 Chronicles 15 verse 7, encouragement to remain faithful despite difficulty. 2 Chronicles 20 verse 15, a reminder that victory ultimately belongs to God. 2 Chronicles 26 verse 5, prosperity is tied to seeking God. 2 Chronicles 34 verse 31, covenant renewal under Josiah. 2 Chronicles 36 verse 23, the invitation to return and rebuild. Relevance today. 2 Chronicles speaks directly to modern life, especially in seasons of decline, uncertainty, or rebuilding. It reminds us that lasting renewal does not begin with external change, but with internal humility. Whether in personal life, leadership, communities, or institutions, the patterns remain the same. Pride leads to blind spots. Compromise weakens foundations. Ignoring correction eventually brings consequences. At the same time, the book offers deep encouragement. No matter how far things have drifted, return is still possible. 2 Chronicles challenges the idea that success alone equals approval. It asks harder questions about character, faithfulness, and responsiveness to truth. For leaders, it is a reminder that influence carries responsibility. For individuals, it is an invitation to pause, reflect, and realign before damage becomes irreversible. The book teaches that reform delayed often becomes reform denied, but repentance acted upon can still bring healing. Closing thought. 2 Chronicles is a story about choices and their long shadows. It shows that spiritual drift rarely happens overnight, and neither does renewal. Both are built step by step. The book ends not with a king on a throne, but with an open door, a call to rise, return, and rebuild. That ending matters. It tells us that God is not finished, even when everything seems lost. Ruins are not the final word. When humility replaces pride and obedience replaces convenience, restoration can begin. 2 Chronicles leaves us with a quiet but powerful truth: no failure is final when hearts are willing to turn back and begin again.